My name is Eliana, and for most of my life, I believed my family was quiet, ordinary, and simple. We were not rich, but we had enough. We shared meals, birthdays, arguments, and apologies like every family should. I grew up thinking our home was built on trust. At least, that is what I wanted to believe. It was a rainy evening when everything changed. The kind of rain that taps gently on windows, reminding you of memories you never asked for. I was cleaning the old desk drawer in my parents' room. They had both passed away a few months earlier, and this was the first time I had the courage to open the drawer where my mother kept her personal things. I took a deep breath, expecting to find old receipts, expired bank papers, maybe a few letters. Instead, I found a photo. It was a faded picture, with worn edges and colors that had softened over the years. At first, I almost smiled. In it, I saw a young woman holding a baby. She looked strikingly like my mother, but there was something different, something I couldn't name. Her smile was gentle, but her eyes seemed sad. And then I noticed it. Standing beside her was a man I had never seen before. He wasn't my father. For a moment, I stared at the picture, trying to make sense of it. The baby in her arms had a small birthmark near the ear. My heart dropped. I had the same birthmark. I placed my finger gently on the photo, tracing the faint outline. My breath grew slow, and the world around me seemed to get quiet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the soft hum of the fan overhead. Questions swirled around me like restless whispers. Who was that man? Why had my parents never mentioned him? And why was the baby's face hauntingly familiar? The next morning, I made tea and sat at the kitchen table, where sunlight spilled across the tiles. I turned the picture over. There was handwriting on the back, barely readable now. It said, "For our future, no matter how far." No names, no dates. I held the photo to my chest and closed my eyes. Suddenly, small moments flashed in my memory. The times my mother would go quiet when I asked about the past. The long looks she shared with my father. The arguments late at night behind closed doors. I swallowed hard. This wasn't just a forgotten picture. It was a piece of truth slipped between years of silence. Later that evening, I visited my aunt, the only relative who might know. When I showed her the picture, her hands trembled. She looked up at me with eyes heavy from years of secrets. "Eliana," she said softly, "there are things you were never told." I felt a chill run down my spine. "And you deserve to know them now." I didn't say a word. I just nodded, holding the photo tighter, because somewhere in that faded image was the beginning of everything I never knew. My aunt and I sat in her living room, a place filled with quiet memories and old photographs hanging on the walls. The afternoon sunlight was soft, almost comforting, but inside me was a storm. I placed the faded picture on the small glass table between us. My aunt stared at it for a long time, her lips pressed tightly together, as if she were deciding whether to speak at all. Finally, she sighed. "Your mother never wanted this to come to you," she whispered, "not because she didn't love you, but because she feared you would look at her differently." I leaned back slowly. Why would I? My voice felt small, like a child asking a forbidden question. She hesitated. "That man in the photo, he was your mother's first love." My heart skipped. The room felt smaller. "They wanted to marry," she continued, "but the family didn't agree. Your grandmother thought he wouldn't be able to provide a stable life." I couldn't imagine my gentle mother caught in something so painful. "So, what happened to him?" I asked. My aunt shook her head. "He left before you were born. Your mother was heartbroken. And your father, well, he stepped in. He helped her through everything. He promised to raise you as his own." She reached out and held my shaking hands. "And he loved you, Eliana, truly." I blinked, feeling tears build behind my eyes. My father had always been gentle, patient. He never treated me differently. But knowing this truth made me question every small moment. Had he ever looked at me and remembered someone else's child? My aunt watched me carefully. "Your parents chose silence," she said. "They thought it would protect you. They didn't want you to feel torn." I nodded slowly, letting her words settle. Outside, the sound of distant children playing in the street filled the quiet space inside my heart. I remembered the nights my mother would sit beside me while I slept, brushing my hair softly. Maybe that was love, mixed with guilt. Before leaving, my aunt reached for a small wooden box from a shelf. "Your mother asked me to give you this one day," she said softly. "I think she hoped she'd be the one to tell you everything." She placed the box in my hands. At home, I sat at the kitchen table again. The house felt too silent, echoing with memories. I opened the box slowly. Inside were folded letters tied with a faded ribbon, and another photo. Clearer this time, the same man, holding a tiny baby with that familiar birthmark. My breath caught. The truth was now more than a glimpse. It was real. I opened the first letter and read the words, "My dear Eliana, if you ever see this, I want you to know." My hands trembled. This was the beginning of answers, and perhaps more questions. If you felt this moment, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel, so you never miss the next chapter of Eliana's emotional journey. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the box open before me. The house was quiet, yet every corner felt heavy, as if the walls carried voices of the past. I picked up the first letter carefully. The paper was thin, edges worn, and the handwriting looked rushed, almost nervous. "My dear Eliana," it began, "I am writing this knowing I may never see you grow." My heart tightened. "Your mother loves you more than life, and though I cannot be by her side anymore, I hope she finds happiness with someone who can protect you both." I paused, closing my eyes. It felt strange hearing emotion from a man I had never met. He wrote about how his family was threatened, how he was told to leave, and how he feared his presence would bring danger. It was more complicated than I expected. The second letter explained how he tried to return to see my mother again, but my grandparents refused. They believed he wasn't worthy. "If I could, I would hold you just once," he wrote. My chest ached at those words. The idea that someone longed for me before I even spoke my first word. It felt heavy. I read until the words blurred from tears. When I finally lifted my head, it was past midnight. The house hummed softly, and the moonlight stretched across the table. I whispered into the quiet room, "Why didn't anyone tell me?" In the days that followed, I carried the letters in my bag. I would reread them whenever I had a moment alone. Each time, new questions surfaced. I felt like a stranger inside my own story. One afternoon, I visited my parents' graveyard. The air was cool, leaves rustling softly. I knelt beside their headstones and placed the letters on my lap. "Why didn't you trust me?" I whispered. "Did you think I couldn't handle the truth?" I wasn't angry, just hurt. Memories flooded in. My father teaching me how to ride a bicycle, walking me to school, cheering for me during school plays. He had never once let me feel unwanted. Maybe love didn't always need shared blood. Maybe love was in the little things, the quiet sacrifices. As I sat there, a shadow fell beside me. It was Aunt. She gently placed her hand on my shoulder. "Your father never wanted you to learn this and feel distant from him," she said. "He feared losing the place he earned in your heart." I wiped a tear, but the truth found me anyway. "Yes," she replied softly, "because the truth always finds a way." When I got home, something odd happened. There was a small envelope slipped under my door, a return address from a nearby town. My heart raced. When I opened it, there was only a name and a short message. "I think we should talk. Daniel." I froze. Daniel? The name from the letters. Was this really him? My journey was no longer about understanding the past. It was about deciding whether I was ready to face it. I spent the whole night staring at that small envelope. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the name pulled at something deep inside my chest. Daniel, the same name written gently at the end of every letter in the box. I traced the ink with my thumb, wondering how someone from a forgotten photograph could suddenly be steps away from my door. The next morning, I gathered my courage and called the number written below the name. The line rang twice before a soft voice answered. "Hello." I took a slow breath. "This is Eliana." There was silence. Then, a shaky exhale. "I never thought you would call," he whispered. We agreed to meet at a small cafe in town. The walk there felt long, each step heavier than the last. My mind was crowded with questions I wasn't sure I was ready to ask. When I arrived, the bell over the cafe door chimed softly. There, at a corner table, sat an older man with tired eyes and hands clasped tightly together. He stood as soon as he saw me. "Eliana," he breathed, as if saying my name felt sacred. We sat. I watched him closely. The lines on his face carried years of worry. His eyes that looked strangely familiar, studied me with care. "I have wanted to meet you since the day you were born," he said quietly. "But life, it was not kind." I swallowed. "Why did you leave?" His gaze dropped. "I was forced," he replied. "Your mother's family believed I wasn't good enough. They threatened me. They made me choose between staying and keeping you safe." His voice cracked. "I chose distance, hoping you would grow without fear." I leaned back, trying to absorb his words. "Why now?" he sighed. "Your mother wrote to me once more before she married your father. She told me she would love you, protect you, and raise you with someone she trusted. After that, she asked me to stay away so you could live without confusion. I felt a soft ache behind my ribs. My mother's silence suddenly made a strange kind of sense. But years passed, he continued. I watched from afar, birthdays, school events. I saw your father cheering for you like you were his whole world. He paused, eyes glistening, and I knew you were safe. I closed my eyes, remembering my father's warm laugh and steady hands. He never once made me doubt his love. I am not here to replace him, Daniel whispered. I came because I wanted to be honest once in my life, to let you decide. My throat tightened. I don't know what to feel, I admitted. You don't have to decide now, he said gently. Just know that I am here, if you ever want to talk again. When I stood to leave, he didn't reach out or ask for more. He simply nodded, accepting the silence between us. Outside, the air was cool. I touched the pocket where I had placed the letter from years ago. The truth hurt, but it also healed something quietly inside me, because every story has more than one side. If this touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel so you never miss the next of Eliana's emotional story. The days after meeting Daniel felt slow and heavy. I went to work, smiled politely, and nodded through conversations, but my mind was always somewhere else. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how two men could shape my life in such different ways, one by presence, the other by absence. One evening, I sat in my living room, the soft lamp beside me filling the room with a yellow glow. I held one of the letters again, reading the words my biological father had written decades ago. They felt honest, full of longing and fear. But then I thought about the man who raised me, my father, and how he never once acted like I wasn't his. A memory surfaced from when I was 10. I had won a small school prize for drawing. I remembered holding up the certificate shyly, and my father lifting me into his arms saying, "You make me proud every day." Those words were warm, steady, real. My chest tightened. Love isn't just blood, I whispered to myself. A soft knock on my door pulled me out of my thoughts. When I opened it, my cousin stood there nervously. "I heard you found something," she said. I let her in and made tea. We sat quietly for a while before she finally spoke. Your dad knew about Daniel," she said gently. "They met once. Years ago." My heart stopped. "They met," she nodded. "Your dad told Daniel that if he ever hurt you, he would take responsibility. He promised to protect you." Her eyes softened. "He wasn't trying to replace anyone. He was trying to save you and your mother from a painful life." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My dad, quiet, humble, had carried such a heavy promise without ever showing anger or bitterness. My cousin continued. "He said he didn't want you to grow up confused. He wanted you to feel whole." The tea in my cup grew cold as I absorbed her words. My father had chosen love over pride, silence over conflict, sacrifice over recognition. Later that night, I visited the old house where I grew up. It was empty now, but the memories echoed from every corner. I sat on the living room floor, remembering how my father would sit beside me while I played with my toys. He never rushed me. He never raised his voice. He just stayed. Tears finally slipped down my cheeks. Not because I was angry, but because I realized how much love had been poured into me quietly, without asking for anything in return. The next morning, before sunrise, I went back to the cemetery. I placed a fresh bouquet on my father's grave. My voice trembled. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything you carried and never said." As the first light painted the sky, I felt something inside me soften, a small bridge forming between two truths, two fathers, and the girl standing between them. Sometimes, understanding doesn't erase pain, it just gives it a place to rest. In the days that followed, I felt something gentle shifting inside me. It wasn't sudden forgiveness or complete clarity, it was just the quiet understanding that love and truth can exist together, even if they're painful. I spent my evenings sorting through old albums, touching faces I had seen all my life, my mother smiling, my father laughing. I wondered if those smiles hid heavy secrets, or if they simply chose happiness over regret. One afternoon, I received a small message from Daniel. "I hope you are well. No pressure. I just wanted to know you're okay." I stared at the message for a long moment, and then typed slowly, "I would like to meet again." His reply came quickly. "Tomorrow, same place." That night, I rehearsed everything I wanted to say, pacing around the living room, as if words might hide behind the furniture. But when morning came, my thoughts softened. I decided not to plan. Some conversations need a natural heartbeat. The cafe felt warmer this time. I saw Daniel, already sitting with 2 cups of tea. When he saw me, he smiled gently. I wasn't sure if you liked tea, he said nervously, so I guessed. I sat down. Tea is perfect. For a moment, we just breathed. Then I asked, did you ever try to contact me? He lowered his eyes. Many times, but your mother asked me not to. She said you were building a good life, and she didn't want to confuse you. I respected her wish, even when it hurt. I wish she had told me herself, I whispered. She wanted to, he said softly, but every time she tried, she saw how close you were to your father. She didn't want to break something beautiful. I nodded slowly. It was strange hearing someone defend the mother who had kept such a big secret from me. I am not angry, I said, just learning to understand. Daniel's eyes glistened. That's more than I deserved. We talked for an hour. He told me about his life, simple, lonely at times, but honest. He showed me a small picture he carried in his wallet. It was me, as a baby, printed from that same photograph. The edges were worn, proof of how many times he had held it. You kept this all these years? I asked, surprised. It was the only piece of you I had. My throat tightened. Suddenly, I didn't see him as a stranger. I saw a man who had missed birthdays, school plays, and moments he could never get back. Before I left, I placed my hand over his. We can start slowly, I said. I don't promise perfect, but I can offer trying. He closed his eyes, relief washing across his face. Trying is enough. As I walked home, I felt a quiet balance forming in my heart. Love didn't need to choose sides anymore. Sometimes, healing isn't loud. It's a whisper that says, I am ready. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel so you never miss the next of Eliana's emotional story. Weeks passed quietly, like pages turning in a gentle book. I met Daniel a few more times, each conversation peeling back another layer of the past. We spoke softly about memories I never knew I had, about the rain the day I was born, about how he waited outside the hospital just to hear if I was healthy. He told me how he watched from distance during my first school play, afraid to step forward, afraid to ruin the life my parents had built for me. It was strange realizing how differently two men had loved me, one from within the walls of my home, and the other from the shadows outside. But just as I began to feel the ground settle beneath my feet, something unexpected happened. One evening, I received a phone call from my aunt. Her voice sounded unusually serious. Eliana, she said quietly, there's someone you need to meet. Please come tomorrow. I spent the night restless, the same anxious tapping in my heart that had followed me ever since I found the photo. When I arrived at her home the next day, I found an elderly woman sitting in the living room, her hands resting lightly on her cane. Her eyes lifted slowly, and I froze. It was my grandmother, the woman who had pushed Daniel away. She motioned for me to sit. I hesitated, then gently lowered myself into the chair across from her. Her voice trembled. I have carried a heavy mistake, she began, one that has haunted my sleep. I kept my face calm, though my pulse raced. When your mother loved Daniel, I feared she would suffer, she said. His family was struggling. His future was uncertain. I wanted stability for her. I thought I was protecting her. She looked down, her fingers trembling. But I did not protect anyone. I only caused pain. I swallowed, feeling old wounds shift. I made him leave, she confessed. I threatened him, and when your mother cried for weeks, I convinced myself it was temporary. Her voice cracked. But then, she found your father, and he was kind, responsible, everything I thought she needed. She wiped her eyes. And when you came, I saw something I didn't expect. Peace, love. Her gaze lifted. But every time I saw Daniel passing by your school from afar, every time your mother's eyes followed quietly, I knew I had stolen something precious. The room fell quiet. My mind replayed every moment of silence I had ever seen between my parents. Finally, she whispered, can you ever forgive an old woman who thought she was right? My heart tightened. I never expected this moment. I looked at her frail, scared, carrying a lifetime of regret, and I realized something. Pain is inherited, but forgiveness can be chosen. I don't promise forgetting, I said softly, but I can promise trying. Her eyes closed in relief, and for the first time, I saw her exhale years of guilt. As I walked home that evening, I understood something. Simple truth isn't meant to divide us. It's meant to heal us, if we let it. And maybe, just maybe, we were ready. The next few days felt different. The air seemed gentler, as if my heart had finally found a way to breathe. For the first time since discovering the photograph, I no longer felt divided between two lives. Instead, I felt like someone learning how to hold both truths softly. One evening, I invited Daniel to visit my parents' graveyard with me. It took courage to ask, and patience to wait for his quiet reply. When the day arrived, we stood together beneath the soft shade of an old tree. He held a small bouquet of white flowers, his hands trembling slightly. "I never thought I would stand here," he whispered. We walked slowly between the stones until we reached my parents' resting place. I placed fresh flowers gently on the cool marble surface. Daniel lowered his bouquet beside mine. He didn't speak for a moment. When he finally did, his voice cracked. "Thank you," he said softly, looking toward my father's stone. "Thank you for loving her and loving our girl." Something warm gathered behind my eyes. No anger, no blame, just honesty. After a long silence, we sat on a nearby bench. Birds chirped softly, and a breeze rustled the grass. It felt peaceful. "Your father was a good man," Daniel said, "better than I was able to be." "You loved us differently," I replied, "but love doesn't disappear just because it was forced to step away." He nodded, his gaze distant. "I hope you can build your life without carrying our mistakes." "I think I already started." We stayed there until the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with quiet colors. Before leaving, I traced the engraved names with my fingertips, whispering a promise I never knew I would say. "I'll be okay, and I'll carry both of you." On my walk home, I passed an old photographer's shop, the kind with dusty frames and vintage cameras. Something pulled me inside. I asked the shopkeeper to restore the faded photo from my mother's drawer. He smiled, nodding with understanding. When I returned days later, he handed me a crisp, clear photograph. The young woman, my mother, looked peaceful, her smile real and bright. The man beside her, Daniel, held me, the tiny baby with the little birthmark. I stared at the picture for a long moment. Then I did something simple. I framed it, not to replace anything, just to remember where my story began. When I hung it in my living room, the space felt whole. It didn't erase the pain or the years of silence, but it reminded me that life isn't written in simple lines. It's written in layers: love, mistakes, forgiveness, and the courage to face what hurts. Now, sometimes when I sit quietly with tea, I glance at that photo. I don't feel confusion anymore. I feel gratitude for two men who loved me in two different worlds, and I finally understand. Family is not defined by secrets. It's defined by the bravery to face them. The photo didn't ruin my story, it completed it. Thank you for watching this emotional journey to the end. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel so you never miss more real-life emotional stories like Eliana.